90% of the 2024 biology practical examination questions have been treated in this video. Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to walk you through possible questions that you might encounter during the practical examination. So do well to stick around and watch this video till the end. So we'll begin with the first specimen, which is the gill of a fish. The gill is a red and finger-like organ which typically serves the purpose of respiration in most aquatic animals. So in essence, it helps to absorb oxygen from dissolved water into the blood, and the blood then transports oxygen to other part of the body. And in doing so, it also removes CO2 from the blood back into the water for excretion. So typically the gill is made up of the gill recurves, the gill arch, and the gill filament. And the gill is also known as the lamella. And on the exterior part or on the external part, it is covered with a gill cover, and that gill cover is called operculum. Some of us might be familiar with this. Probably sometimes when you try to cut your fish, there's a part you tend to raise up. That part is called the gill cover, the operculum. And the gill is richly supplied with blood because of its function, because the blood have to transport oxygen. So the gill is able to absorb oxygen from this water into the blood. Then blood does its own function of transportation, and also the gill also removes CO2 from the blood back into water. So in essence, the gill is typically an organ of respiration. And also, in addition, our respiratory organ also serve the purpose of excretion. Just like in human, our respiratory organ helps to remove CO2, and CO2 is like a waste product. In doing so, it also helps to remove excess water from the body. So typically, our respiratory organ or respiratory organ in most organisms serve the purpose of excretion. So when asked to use this, you can tell them that okay, number one, it is used for respiration, such as that is the exchange of gases. Number two, you can write it is an organ of excretion because it helps to remove CO2 from the blood. And number three, it is responsible for the transfer of ions between the organism and water. Probably there are some certain ions that are needed or that are not needed. The gills help to serve that function of removing them from the body. And in addition, how does the gill function? Could be asked in the exam. What happens is that the fish takes in water through the mouth, then this water moves to the gill. At the gills, oxygen is removed from the water into the blood, and then CO2 from the blood is eliminated or removed from the blood into the water. Then water is finally eliminated or excreted from the body, and then those water leave through what is known as the gill slit. So moving on, specimen B is the liver of a domestic fowl with an attached gallbladder, and the scientific name for the domestic fowl is the Gallus domesticus. Remember, this name should be underlined separately, and there are levels of classification for domestic fowl which you should know. Then moving on to the description. For description, the liver is the largest internal organ, just like in most other organisms, and it is bilobed. Bilobed in the sense that it has two lobes, just like you can see on the screen. The liver is dark reddish brown in color and is located ventrally. Ventrally simply means at the front, not at the back. In the abdomen, it is closely related, like it is very close to the proventriculus and the spleen. There's a part called the proventriculus, that's a stomach, the second part of the stomach. Sorry, rather the first part of the stomach of the domestic fowl, and it is the part that is closer to the gizzard. Then you have the spleen. So it has a smooth outer surface. When you touch the liver, it is so smooth on the outer portion. There are various functions of the liver which you could be asked in the exam. They basically help to synthesize and metabolize fat. It helps in detoxification. By detoxification, we mean the removal of toxic substance from the body, and it helps in the storage of various substances such as excess glucose or iron. Then remember, the specimen has a gallbladder attached to it, so they can ask you the description of the gallbladder and also the uses. So the gallbladder is a small pear-shaped organ, or it's a sac-like organ what it does is that it stores or it houses a greenish pigment, and that pigment is called bile. So the gallbladder is also known as the cholecyst, and then bile is a digestive pigment or a digestive fluid, and the function of bile is to help in the digestion or breakdown, or we can say emulsification of fat. So typically, the gallbladder houses the bile, and then the bile helps to store, or rather, the bile helps to emulsify or break down fatty substance. Moving on to specimen C, which is the lungs of a domestic fowl. Recall that the scientific name for a domestic fowl is the Gallus domesticus. Now, when we are told to describe, the lungs is simply the primary organ of respiration in the domestic fowl, just like the gills is the primary organ of respiration in the fish and other aquatic and most other aquatic organisms. So the lungs is located in the thorax, that is the chest, and the domestic fowl has two symmetrical lungs, just like what is displayed on your screen. And they are connected to the trachea, because the trachea serves as a passage for air during respiration. So it is pink red with a smooth outer surface, just like the liver. The major function is that it is actively responsible for the exchange of gases, that's respiration, typically that's taking of oxygen and elimination or removal of carbon for oxide. In addition, beyond the function of the lungs in respiration, it can also serve in excretion. Remember, we said that most respiratory structures also serve the purpose of excretion. And also, the bird lacks what we call a diaphragm. They have ribs and sternum, but they lack a diaphragm. Typically, the diaphragm is a muscle that separates the thoracic region or thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, and it also aids respiration. For example, in man, we have a rib sternum and then the diaphragm. When this when there are movement in this structure, it helps or it aids respiration. It helps to compress the lungs or expand the lungs. But in the bird, they have the ribs and sternum, but they lack a diaphragm. And lastly, the terminal portion or the end portion of the lungs is called the alveoli. It is at the alveoli that there is an actual exchange of gases, because the alveoli is richly supplied blood vessels. So moving on, specimen D is the gizzard of a domestic fowl. It's also called the ventriculus. There's a stomach before it called the proventriculus, but for the gizzard, it is known as the ventriculus. So it's a thick walled muscular organ. Why is it thick? Because of its function of grinding food particles with grit. So it's a thick muscular organ, which is a part of the bird stomach, and it's used for grinding food particles. And within the gizzard, there are tiny foam particles. Those particles are called grits. Now, when this grit mixes or grinds with the food particle, it helps to crush down the food particle into absorbable form, which is a process of digestion. So technically, they help the bird to grind food particles to aid digestion. So that's the basic function of the gizzard. So nutritionally, when eaten by man, they contain protein, vitamins, and they are rich in zinc, iron, and phosphorus. They have a very low fat and low cholesterol content. So moving on to specimen E, which is the whole intestine of a domestic fowl. So the whole intestine both consists of the small and the large intestine. Now, where does the small intestine begin and where does it end? It actually begins from the gizzard. Remember, the gizzard is also called the ventriculus, and it terminates at the junction of the ceca and the colon. Colon also means large intestine. So that's where it begins and ends. So it is divided into three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So the basic function of small intestine is it is in digestion and then absorption of food nutrients. So the duodenum is distinct or different from the other part because it is quite enlarged than the other part. So like we said, the basic function of the small intestine is to digest food particles and also to absorb food nutrients. So this large intestine, which is next, is also called the colon. So it begins at the end of the intestine cecal, and its function is majorly the absorption of water and also the formation of physics. So we move to specimen F, which is the ginger rhizome. And the scientific name for the ginger is the Zingiber officinale. And there are various levels of classification which you must know, most especially the kingdom it belongs to, which is the Plantae, and then the division, which is the Trachyophyta, and the other levels of classification. So when we are told to describe specimen F, which is ginger rhizome, but we have to know what a rhizome is. A rhizome is simply a stem that has been modified for food storage. So typically, food is supposed to be stored in fruit. But if any other part outside the fruit stores food material, we say that part is modified for food storage and they have several names. But in this case, a rhizome is a modified stem for that purpose of storing food materials. So also it is a perennial crop. Why? Because it lasts more than 3 years. And another thing like produce what we call pseudostem. Pseudo means false stem, and this stem they bear leaves just like what is displayed on the screen. And this leaf are about 1 meter tall. So it bear a narrow leaf, and then they can ask us the uses of the ginger rhizome. It is mostly used as spice. Most persons use it for cooking, and also it has medicinal purpose. So I've defined what a rhizome is as a continuous growing horizontal underground stem which bear lateral shoots and adventitious roots at intervals. So ginger undergo the vegetative type of propagation using their rhizome. So a closely related plant to the ginger is called the turmeric. But the major difference between the turmeric and the ginger is that the turmeric has an orange um stem internally, while the ginger is white internally. In addition, there are several parts of a plant that are modified for food storage, and the basic ones are the corm, we have the rhizome, we have the bulb, we have the tube, and then we have the sucker. Then the ginger possesses what we call adventitious root. And what's an adventitious root? A root that grows beyond or away, or any root that does not come out from the main root is called the adventitious root. And besides, the other types of root which you should know, we have what we call the buttress root, we have what we call the breathing root, and then we have what we call the taproot, and lastly we have what we call the fibrous root. So in your exam they can ask you to list the various type of root, or they can tell you to list the various modified part of a plant for food storage. So we move on to look at specimen G, which is the onion bulb. The scientific name for the onion bulb is called the Allium cepa. Remember to always underline your scientific name. So it has various levels of classification, down from the kingdom to the species. So by description, the onion bulb, remember bulb is a modified form of the plant for food storage. And interestingly, the bulb is the modified leaf. That's why the onion, that fleshy part we eat, is the leaf of the plant. So it's modified for food storage, and it's a vegetable that grows underground. So a lot of vitamins, mineral and antioxidants. And they have low calories, and they are used as vegetables and spices mainly for cooking. It's interesting to know that they are biennial crops. In exam, you can ask what's the lifespan for the onion. Those ones they are biennial plants, meaning they grow, mature, and produce fruit within 2 years. And there are two types of onions. You have the white onion, then the purple or brown onion. Then the method of propagation when asked, you see vertical propagation using the bulb. So move to specimen H, which is the leaf of a Bryophyllum plant with adventitious roots. So the scientific name for this particular plant that is displayed on the screen is called the Bryophyllum pinnatum. Now there are several levels of classification, but I believe you should know the kingdom and phylum, and also the genus and species this organism or common organism around us fall under. So by description, it starts when it's called the air plant, it's called the cathedral bed, it's called the miracle leaf. When I was still young, they call it the resurrection plant, but it has the ability to regenerate even when the leaves falls to the ground. So the leaf is succulent, yeah, very succulent. Most times you see some fluid particles coming out. And it's called biophyllum because it produces roots on its leaf through a process called body. So it's medicinal like I said, and because it's believed to cure many illness So the mode of propagation of Bryophyllum through the leaf of the stem because new roots will arise from a certain point and then from there new plants will shoot up. So hence their method of vegetative reproduction through the leaf of the stem. So let's move to specimen J, which is the cassava stem. The scientific name for the plant is the Manihot esculenta, and there are various levels of classification ranging from the kingdom to the species. So by description, the stem is a slender and long part of the cassava plant, which is usually used for propagation. Simple. Then for the plant, it's a perennial crop which is cultivated annually in the sense that this plant can live for 3 or more years. That's why it's perennial. But you have to cultivate it annually. Like every year, you have to do your ridges, then cut your stem, and then do planting again and again yearly. So it's the stem contains a poisonous compound called cyanide, and then the cassava stem is the obvious part for reproduction of a planting. That's true vegetative or sexual reproduction. So we move to specimen K, which happens to be the cassava tuber. Now, a tuber is a modified root of a plant for food storage. Just like we have the yam tuber, the root stores food for that plant. So the cassava tuber is a modified root of the plant, of the cassava plant for food storage. And we have type of cassava tubers or cassava as a whole, which are the sweet and the bitter cassava. Now, the cassava has rich amount of carbohydrates and very high amount of calories, and it's used for production of many other household food products like gari, very common for food, cassava chip, bread, and cassava cakes and the likes. So move to specimen L, which is the thoracic vertebrae. We have 12 thoracic vertebrae in man and 13 in rats. The thoracic vertebrae forms a part of the axial skeleton. Now the skeleton is divided into two, which are the axia and then the appendicular. For the axial skeleton, it is the skeleton of the head, the neck, and then the trunk. Then anything outside this place becomes the appendicular skeleton. And things outside there are our upper limbs and then our lower limbs. So these guys, they form part of the appendicular skeleton. But what we are looking at today is a part of the axial skeleton. And just to add, it is the bone that forms, it is the backbone of the chest rhizome. So the thoracic vertebrae begins from the neck, that is from the seventh cervical vertebrae to the first lumbar vertebrae. So characteristics of this bone is that it has what we call a body or a centrum. It has a spine, it has a neural canal, and then it has the transverse process. So those are general features they share with other vertebrae. But don't talk about peculiar features. This will help you when you have to differentiate between one specimen and another. Number one is that this is the only bone that I would call a costal facet. The importance of costal facet is to ensure that ribs are attached. And obviously, you can see that it is only within the chest. That's where we have ribs. In our abdomen, we don't have ribs, so there's no need for a costal facet. Then number two is that they have long spinous process, and also they have long transverse process. And lastly, they have this heart-shaped structure. In your exam, you could be told to list the function of this specimen, which is thoracic vertebrae. So just like other bones in the body, they will provide support and rigidity and also shape to the organism. Also, they provide attachment to the muscle rib. Like I told you, this is the only bone that have costal facet. And the presence of costal facet is to ensure that they bind or they are attached to the ribs. Also, they have a their function is to protect the spinal cord that passes through the neural canal, and also they form what we call the rib cage with other bones like the sternum and the ribs. And the function of the rib cage is to protect the delicate organs that are within it. Also, in addition, we have several types of ribs, which are the true ribs, false rib, and then the floating ribs. So for the true, we have 7 pairs. For the false rib, we have 3 pairs, and then for the floating rib, we have 2 pairs. So in total, we have 12 pairs of ribs, but 24 in total. So let's move to specimen M, which is the humerus bone. So it is a part of the appendicular skeleton It is the largest bone of the upper limb, and it articulates with the scapula at the joint called the glenoid cavity. And the joint formed there is a shoulder joint or a ball and socket type of joint. Then the lower end of the bone articulate with the radius and the ulna to form an elbow joint. And that joint is we also call it an hinge joint. So the part of the humerus which you should know are the neck, the head, the shaft, the medial and lateral epicondyle, and the greater and lesser tuberosity. So for functions, it is obvious they aid movement, they are factory of muscle, and then they provide shape, strength, and rigidity. So just to add, you should know the various type of joint in case you're asking an exam and where they are located. So we have ball and socket, we have hinge, we have pivot, we have gliding, and we have suture joints. So these joints are found in, for example, ball and socket joint in the shoulder and the hip joint. Then for the hinge joint in the elbow and then the knee joint. For the pivots are located between the atlas and axis. Then we have gliding and sliding, which are located between the bones of the wrist. Just touch your wrist, the bones found there, they have gliding and sliding. And last, we have suture joint. We also call that joint an immovable joint. So that's that for the humerus. So we move to the next specimen, which is specimen N, and specimen N happens to be dry mango seed, and the scientific name for the plant is the Magnifera indica, and it has several levels of classification, all the way from kingdom down to species. So by description, the dry mango seed is a large fibrous seed. Why is it fibrous? You see hair or strand-like particles on the seed, especially when dry, and it's a dicotyledonous plant, and the fruit bears a single seed. So moving quickly, that hard part is called an endocarp. So the seed is covered by an hard endocarp, and then the embryo stays within that endocarp. And for extra knowledge, the embryo located within the seed is covered by two coats. We have the inner tegment and then the outer tester. So for fruit classification, the mango fruit is a true fruit, and then it's a simple fruit, and also it is succulent fruit. So it's a true, simple, and succulent fruit. And by classification, it is a drupe. Drupe are those fruit that has fleshy fleshy epicarp and mesocarp, but they have very hard and stony endocarp. If you look at the mango, that endocarp is very hard. You can't even bite it with your teeth. So for type of placentation, they have what we call a marginal placentation. So mango is very rich in vitamin A, C, and K, and other potassium, magnesium, and other ions respectively. So they have to boost the immune system, and they're also rich in carbohydrates, um, and um, and they are very low in fat and cholesterol. So we move on to specimen P, which is the femur bone. It is quite similar to the humerus, but for the femur bone, it is the thigh bone and it forms part of the appendicular skeleton, and it is found in our lower limbs. The head of the femur fits into the acetabulum of the hip bone, just like the head of the humerus fit into the glenoid cavity of the scapula. So when the head of the humerus fit into the hip bone, it forms what's called the hip joint, and that's also a type of ball and socket joint. So the lower end of the femur bone articulate with two bones, which are the tibia and then the fibula. That's to form the knee joint. That's an hinge joint. So the femur is regarded as the thickest, the strongest, and then the longest bone. So it is much thicker and longer than the humerus. So it has a neck and head, greater and lesser trochanter rather, and then medial and lateral epicondyle. So for the function, just like other bone, it provides support. It provides it gives us the ability to move and stand. It provides attachment to muscles, tendon, and ligament, and also that long bone, because the femur bone has what we call a red bone area. It helps in production of what? Red blood cells. So move to specimen Q, which is the lumbar vertebrae. So it's a part of the exoskeleton because it is within the trunk, and there are 5 lumbar in man, then 6 in the rabbit, and in between any of these vertebral bone, whether lumbar, thoracic, or cervical, or sacral, They are a disc, and these discs are made up of cartilage. They are placed within the bone to prevent things like friction, wear and tear, and the rest. So there's an intervening vertebral disc. So it has the body, or the centrum as we call it. It has the spinal process, transverse process, and neural canal. So moving on, the lumbar vertebrae has some peculiar features, which are it is the thickest vertebrae. It has a large body or centrum, but though it has a narrow canal compared to thoracic vertebrae. What are the functions? It provides attachment for muscle, protect the spinal cord, it bears the weight of the body, and also it provides support and rigidity to the body. So we move on to take the last specimen, which are the dry orange seed, and its scientific name is the Citrus sinensis. So it has a level of classification all the way from the kingdom down till the species. So by description, the orange seed or the specimen given to us are small spherical seed with white seed coat, and it's a dicotyledonous fruit because it bears two seed leaves, and its fruit is spherical with an outer pea and no underlying fibrous layer. I'll talk about it some later. That's why orange fall under what we call the hesperidium. So fruit classification is a true fruit. It's a simple fruit just like the carb together there. It is a succulent fruit and an hesperidium. What an hesperidium? An hesperidium is simply a fruit that has sectioned centers. For example, now tangerine we call it most times, or the orange has sectioned puffs which you can take out. You can separate these puffs. Then for a type of placentation, a type we call the axial placentation. So quickly take a look at the benefit of the orange fruit. So the fibrous layer serve as roughages which aid digestion. Also, it's a good source of vitamin. And lastly, the juicy layer helps to prevent hydration. It's a very natural way of preventing hydration. So viewers, I hope you learned something from this video. Don't forget to like this video and do it to subscribe to this channel so that you always get notified whenever I release any new video. Also, do it to drop your questions in the comment section and also share this video to your friends. Thank you.